The Bassmaster Elite Series just announced their new forward-facing sonar rules for 2026. Next season, only half the tournaments will allow forward-facing sonar. If you guys watch a lot of my videos, you know I do fishing trips both without and with forward-facing sonar, but I feel like the bigger challenge right now is actually catching fish without forward-facing sonar, especially in a 5 bass limit format tournament. It's been getting a lot tougher to catch fish offshore as anglers continue to pressure fish with forward-facing sonar, and I find that it's really hard to actually use the techniques I was using 5 or 10 years ago to catch offshore bass because those fish are getting so picky. It's even getting hard to catch them with forward-facing sonar baits like a jig head minnow.
How are there that many fish around my bait and I'm not hooking a single one of them? Are you serious?
And it's just something that I feel like is going to continue to get tougher and tougher as more anglers start using forward-facing sonar. This means that we're all gonna have to start finding new strategies and new techniques in a 5 bass tournament to put fish in the boat. The bank is still getting beaten up by the bank beaters that have always been fishing there, and now the offshore fish that are on obvious structure spots are really tough to catch. So how do we strategize to find and catch quality 5 bass limits with this new kind of forward-facing, not forward-facing dynamic that we have on all the major tours? To try to figure out this puzzle, I want to start challenging myself every single week to do a Catch 15 challenge. This is a challenge I invented years ago where I basically go out to a public body of water, usually a big tournament like Grand Lake, Beaver Lake, Arkansas River, places like that. I try to catch 5 bass for 15 pounds. 15 pounds of bass is a really good limit in tournaments pretty much any time of the year on the lakes that I fish. And I'm doing it without any practice, any help, and now without any forward-facing sonar. Now, I still might be using forward-facing sonar in other videos, but I really want to challenge myself to try to find some off-the-wall patterns, some new techniques without forward-facing sonar, because that's going to be very relevant in the upcoming years as pro fishing now has this like 50-50 dynamic going on. I also feel like I'm gonna have to discover brand new strategies because my old strategies from 5 years ago when I didn't have forward-facing sonar are not as effective because again, those fish are being picked on. So for my first Catch 15 challenge, I'm gonna be heading out to Lake Hudson in Oklahoma. Lake Hudson's just one lake down from Grand Lake, and it's a pretty shallow fishery. It sets up a lot like a river on the upper end, though there are some traditional lake elements on the lower end. Though it's not as much of a highland reservoir as you would think of like with Grand Lake or Beaver Lake, it definitely has more of like a lowland look to it. And I want to try to find some off-the-wall areas and patterns that are going to have fish that aren't being pressured by other fishermen. That's not an easy task, especially in September. We're going to be going out in the middle of September. September is the toughest month of the year to fish in my region of the country here in Arkansas, Oklahoma. And usually it's tough to even just get 5 fish in the boat. So I'm giving myself a really tough challenge this time around, but I want to continue to challenge myself like this because that's what's going to make me a better angler. And I feel like it's going to give some really interesting content for you guys. As far as the areas I want to focus on, there are a couple of obvious things that I could be doing if I wanted to fish the traditional styles that maybe the other anglers on the lake are using. One of those would be just beating the bank with a buzzbait and a jig. You can catch a lot of fish just throwing the buzzbait down rocky banks and around shade pockets and things like that, targeting some of the bass that are up there feeding on the brim and bluegill that are spawning throughout the summer. You can also catch fish around shallow boat docks and laydowns, flipping boat docks, things like that. And those are both really great patterns. If I did that all day, I still would give myself a chance to catch some pretty quality fish, but I feel like that's something that a lot of other anglers are doing, and I don't want to follow the crowd. I can also go a little bit further offshore, fishing in that like maybe 8 to 15 foot zone and try to find some fish that are on some offshore brush piles, rock piles, ledges, things like that. There's usually a few groups of fish on Lake Hudson that set up in that zone even through September, but again, those fish are getting more and more pressured every year, and with forward-facing sonar, a lot of anglers are actually going and targeting those fish. So I'm not gonna go for that strategy either. Where does that leave me? Well, I basically can't fish the bank, and I can't fish offshore, but I can fish that middle zone. And this is something I've been doing a ton this year to catch a lot of quality fish all across the Arkansas, Oklahoma area. What I basically focus on are areas that are in that 2 to 5 foot zone, but off the bank. There are a lot of places like this on Lake Hudson, fortunately, and there's also some historical Google Earth imagery when the lake was drawn down, and it'll help me find some of these off-the-wall cover and structure spots that are in that 2 to 5 foot zone. The main thing I'm gonna be looking for are hard spots or rock piles just off the bank. I don't want anything that's way out in the middle really. I want to find stuff that's maybe a cast to 2 casts off the bank, and it's basically going to be an isolated hard spot. I'll show you some of them here on Google Earth. Again, this is when the lake is drawn down. If I mark one of these and bring the water back up, you can see that it's going to be underwater when I get there, but I basically want to try to find as many of these hard spots as possible that are hard to see with the naked eye. Most of the banks I'm going to be fishing are going to be very, very flat, and you're not going to know the rocky spot is there unless you pay attention to Google Earth or mapping. I can find some of these spots on mapping as well. You can look for small, little high spots on the mapping just off the bank, though this can be a little bit inconsistent. The mapping isn't always perfect up here in that shallow water zone, and that's why I actually find these areas are pretty productive, because it's not that easy to find them. It's also not easy to graph them with side imaging, 2D sonar, and down imaging. You can see them somewhat with side scan, but it gets a little bit tricky, and maybe when I get out to the lake, I'll show you guys what these look like on side scan so you can see, because it's really not that easy just to graph down these banks and find these rocky spots. So I'm really going to rely heavily on my Google Earth map study and try to mark as many high spots and hard spots as I can from this drawn down imagery. My plan is to run as many of these as possible, maybe even re-hitting areas multiple times throughout the day. I've fished this pattern before on Lake Hudson this time of the year, and I've pulled up on one of these rocky spots and caught 15 pounds in about 5 minutes. So I know this pattern works. It's historically a good pattern, but normally when I go to Lake Hudson, I don't catch them on the same spot every single time. I have to relocate fish because these fish are pulling up on these spots as a feeding spot to feed on shad. When we get in September, shad are going to start moving into these creeks and migrating back into the bays, and they're going to stop off on these hard spots to feed on plankton. And then the bass are going to ambush those shad on those hard spots. The shad will be basically everywhere, and there will be fish kind of schooling up and just chasing them around. But what I want to focus on are those fish that are actually targeting the shad on those hard spots. That's kind of like the feeding dinner plates that they're going to be using to ambush those shad. So if I can run as many of them as possible, I have a really good chance of running into at least one that has some fish on it, and hopefully it's 5 of the right ones. Really quick guys, I want to let you know about my brand new traditional offshore fishing playbook. This playbook utilizes techniques that I developed over the past 20 years to target bass offshore without the use of forward-facing sonar. In this playbook, I provide detailed breakdowns of all the strategies I use to target offshore bass, with detailed flow charts, diagrams, and a lot of helpful tips to adapt based on the lake type, the conditions you're facing, and a lot of other factors so you can consistently find and catch bass offshore without forward-facing sonar. Definitely check out my traditional offshore playbook at fishthemoment.com. I now want to get into all the gear that I've prepped for this fishing trip. I have a general idea of what I'm getting into, but not fully. I haven't been to Lake Hudson this year because it's been like 8 or 9 feet high and not the safest for boat navigation. So this is gonna be my first trip out there all year. Again, I don't really know what to expect, but I kind of think my main tool is going to be a Squarebill. This is a traditionally great bait for me in September. I've caught them really well on this exact bait on Lake Hudson in September before on these rocky spots. It's just a KVD 1.5 Squarebill in the sexy shad color. I've upgraded the stock treble hooks to Gamakatsu size 4 EWG hooks just to make sure that I don't lose any fish that are just barely hooked. I can still lose some, but it improves my odds at least. I'm pairing that with some 14-pound monofilament. I like monofilament with my Squarebills because it has a little bit more stretch, and again, if those fish are pulling really close to the boat, it has a little bit more give so that the hooks don't pull free. I'm also using a pretty limber rod. This is a Denali Lithium Pro 7-foot medium power moderate action crankbait rod. It is a very bendy rod, so when those fish are pulling and fighting, they don't pull those hooks out. And this is going to be my go-to setup. Just got a Black Max reel that's like 8 years old now, or 7 years old. Got it for 30 bucks when reels were 30 bucks. But still rocking on that 6 3-to-1 reel. Now this Squarebill isn't the only crankbait I'm gonna have on the deck of the boat. Because I don't know how deep these rocky spots are gonna be that are holding fish, I need to have baits that dive different depths. So one of the baits I like to throw is a Striking Series 6 crankbait. This normally dives 10 to 13 feet, but I actually pair it on 20-pound monofilament line, and this makes it go only like maybe 6 to 8 feet deep, and because it has a big bill, it can grind through rocks and brush really well without getting hung up. I'm just upgrading those stock treble hooks to size 2 Gamakatsu EWGs. Now I'll basically just crank these same rocky spots that I would with the Squarebill. You can even throw this Series 6 up as shallow as like 3 and 4 feet of water and it'll still dig through the bottom, and I've caught some really nice fish doing that. So that's kind of another another option. It's a little bit bigger profile than the Squarebill as well, though not that much bigger, and it just gives me another option if those fish are a little bit deeper on those rocky spots. I'm pairing that up with a Denali Covert 7'6" medium heavy power moderate action crankbait rod. Again, a whippy rod so that those fish can't pull the hooks out as easy, and pairing that with another Black Max reel from like 7 years ago, 6-3-1. The last crankbait I have here is another striking crankbait, but this is a bigger crankbait in case I get a good limit in the boat and I need just one big kicker. It's the KVD 8.0 Squarebill. It's a really big Squarebill. I've caught them on Lake Hudson in June before in a video on this. Caught over 15 pounds in that video, and I caught them all on this bait. So I know they'll eat it, and if I find a spot with big gizzard shad, or I just want to try to go for one big bite, this is the crankbait to go for. It'll dive as shallow as 2 foot of water, and it works all the way out to like 6 or 7. Again, pairing that with some 20-pound monofilament, and I've just upgraded the stock treble hooks on here to a size 1 Gamakatsu round bend hook. I don't know why I went with the round bends on this crankbait versus the EWGs. I just have always used the round bends on this, and it seems to work well. I'm using a 7'10" extra heavy power moderate action crankbait rod in the Denali Lithium Pro lineup. Again, whippy rod, monofilament line to have some extra give, and this is a Max Z reel, or Max X, I don't even know, Max Z. They don't make this anymore, but it's a 7-to-1 gear ratio Black Max. I think it was 50 bucks when I bought it 5 years ago. So that's that setup there. And so those are my 3 crankbaits I'm gonna be using to target these offshore rocky spots. But I wanna have a few other baits tied on just in case I want to switch it up a little bit. One bait that I've been experimenting with a bit is this new buzzbait from Picasso. The guys at Picasso sent me this bait, and it is the Rusty Squeaker Slapper Blade buzzbait. It's basically a combination of a very squeaky buzzbait that has a rusty rivet. It's pre-rusted. It's kind of interesting. So it has a really squeaky sound out of the package, but it also has the ability to hit off of the head of the buzzbait. I kind of need to... There we go. So you can see that blade actually hits off the head of that buzzbait. So it's going to squeak and it's going to clack. And I really like this buzzbait because it has a lot of drawing power. When I'm fishing in dirtier water like I am on Lake Hudson, and I'm trying to draw fish out of 2, 3, 4 feet of water on these rocky spots, this buzzbait will actually pull them up to eat this thing, and you can throw it right over the same rocky spots I'm throwing the Squarebill, especially those shallower rocky spots, and they will crush this thing. I'm just using a 1/2 ounce size because I'm not using a trailer on the back. I'm not skipping this or anything. I'm just bombing it out there. So I stick with a standard skirt, 1/2 ounce size so I can cast it. This is a Denali Lithium Pro 7-foot heavy power, moderate fast action frog rod. I like a rod with, again, a little bit more give, just so that those fish get a second to eat that buzzbait. I'm also putting a trailer hook on this buzzbait to make sure that I don't miss any short strikers, and I'm using braided line. I always throw my buzzbaits on braid. This is 50-pound braided line with another Max X Abu Garcia bait casting reel. Again, I'm not sponsored by Abu Garcia. I just had this reel because I bought them cheap at Walmart, and it's a 7-to-1 gear ratio. Bought it for like 49 bucks a long time ago, but that's my buzzbait setup. I have another Topwater on here as well in case the fish starts schooling or I feel like I need a Topwater for whatever reason. This is just a Zara spook, 1-knocker, just a head and 1-knocker spook. Really good bait. It will call those fish up with that 1-knocker sound. I have a feathered treble hook on the back just to give it a little extra flash. And just pairing that on a spinnerbait rod, actually. I like a little bit stouter rod actually with my spooks because I'll make long casts and I really want to get those fish hooked. And this is a 6'10" medium heavy power fast action spinnerbait rod in the Denali Lithium Pro lineup. But I'm pairing that with 20-pound Berkley Big Game monofilament. The mono has extra stretch, but the rod has a little bit less give. It's a good balance for getting those fish in. You can still cast it really well. And I like that setup a lot. Nice little deal. Again, Black Max 6-to-1 gear ratio reel. Next up, we have some slower moving baits. This is a really good bait for me in September. I actually always have this in the deck of the boat in September and October, and it is a black shaky head. This is actually a Dirty Jigs 1/4 ounce Scott Canterbury shaky head. And it's my favorite shaky head jig head because I can throw it on a bait caster. Because I'm fishing around a lot of rocks and things like that, I don't like throwing a spinning rod that much. I don't like throwing a spinning rod that much, period. And this Scott Canterbury shaky head is a really nice beefy hook that you can throw with a bait caster, and it still pairs up well on a little black finesse worm. This is just a big bite bait 7-inch finesse worm in all black. This is a trick I learned over in the Carolinas, fishing in Raleigh. If you know the lakes over there, you know. And a lot of the guys threw this black shaky head and they caught some giant fish with me. I had 9-pounder, a 7, a 6, all caught in this black shaky head, and I'm now a believer of it. Now I just pair it on a 7'4" medium heavy power fast action worm jig rod in the Denali Lithium Pro lineup. A little bit longer rod, stouter rod, but I really like, again, that shaky head. It's the Dirty Jig Scott Canterbury 1/4 ounce. I'll link it down in the description. It's the best shaky head for a bait caster, and you can lay into them and it's awesome. And I'm just putting some 15-pound fluorocarbon line on here with a Bates Hundo reel. This is my most expensive reel I own by like a factor of 10 practically. They gave it to me at the Classic. I'm still liking it. I'm not 100% sold on super expensive reels, but I have it, so I use it. And that's my setup there. I'll just be dragging this around those rocky spots. And then last but not least, I have a jig. I always have to have a jig ready to go. This is actually just a dock skipping jig. It's the Picasso Dock Rocket old school jig. It has this old school rubber skirt. It's a little bit beefier profile. It's great when I'm fishing in September and want just like one big bite under a boat dock or on a lay down. And I'm pairing that with a Big Bite Baits College Craw 4-inch, and I'm just kind of cutting that down. And that is a sweet little jig. It is a big fish bait, and again, if there's a really juicy boat dock that I just see and I want to go skip, I'll probably go skip this around the boat dock, or if I see a really nice laydown, I'll just pitch it up in there. And it's just a jig I have a lot of confidence in, 1/2 ounce, big profile. It's there for a big bite. I'm trying to get 15 pounds in the boat, and in September, again, 15 pounds is not easy to come by. There was a BFL actually on Grand Lake this past weekend, and it took like 15 pounds a day. If you did that, you're in like the top 5. So that's guys who practice out there and fish that lake all the time. I'm going to a lake I haven't been to all year with no practice. So not necessarily having the best odds right here, but we want to try to, again, challenge ourselves when we go to the lake. And even though maybe I won't always achieve the catch 15, I like the challenge. I like to try to set that bar high for myself and see if we can reach it. And really quick, let me explain the gear for this bait. I almost forgot. Just throwing this jig on the 7'4" heavy power fast action worm and jig rod in the Denali Lithium Pro lineup, and pairing that with a Abu Garcia Max Pro reel. This is one of my newer reels, 7-to-1 gear ratio. A little bit more expensive, but picked up at Academy. And that's my setup for that jig. And that's my whole lineup. I may use different baits when I get out to the lake. I have a bunch of other rods in my rod box with different stuff and different baits, but that's at least my game plan. You kind of have an idea of why I'm picking the areas I'm picking, my overall strategy, the baits I'm going to try to use, and hopefully this preparation is going to help set me up for success on Lake Hudson. If you guys want to check out my Catch 15 challenge from Lake Hudson, make sure you subscribe to the Fishing One YouTube channel. I'll be posting that video pretty soon after this one, and you guys will see how it went. Other than that, we'll see you guys in the next video.